Good morning and welcome to the TPN Credit Bureau training for today. We haven't done one of these in quite a while. With me in studio is Jade Matembu.
Hi everyone.
And Michelle Dickens, who will be facilitating the Q&A for us today. Remember, just 3 things, like always, before we get going. You need to be logged into YouTube to be able to access the chat and ask your questions. Please feel free to do so during the session, but we will be dealing with the majority of those questions in the Q&A 15 minutes right at the end. Second thing, remember, we are doing a Q&A for 15 minutes at the end. The feedback forms will be available for you through the bit.ly link. Go and access that. It's not just important for our own feedback, but obviously for your CPD points. We are asking you a couple of questions today on what type of training you would like for the next TPN trainings. And then thirdly, if we seem a little bit blurry, go down to the cog right down at the bottom of the screen, go and click that. Make sure you're selecting 720p or higher, and then it's going to increase the quality of what you're seeing on your screen today. Interesting topics we are discussing today, Jade, for the first Credit Bureau training of 2021. We've actually developed this training into 5 unique chapters. I'm going to take you through different checks that you can run through the system, including your pre-assessment, your know your client, as well as the deed search. And then I'm going to take you through the different credit checks. I'm specifically going to showcase the difference between the credit checks when you submit data into the Credit Bureau system and when you don't submit data. And we all obviously want you to go submit data. It's very simple to go and do. If you're unsure of how to do that, speak to our data department at TPN, the normal lines, the 0861-876-000 number, or email data@tpn.co.za. Jade, you're going to take us through 3 different chapters. What are you going to take us through?
So today I'll be going through the A to Z of rental success, how to effectively use your TPN residential lease pack. And then the next section will be a question many of you are dealing with right now. My tenant has failed to pay. What happens now? And lastly, we'll be going through how to rehabilitate a delinquent tenant through the submission of data.
Thank you very much. Just a few interesting things today. We did pull some data yesterday for the rental monitor report that will go out for Q1. But just interestingly enough, the escalation rates has not increased. It has actually stagnated at minus 0.75%. We do, however, have an increase in the good standing ratio by about 0.75%. That's gone up to 78.4%. And then your vacancy, oh my word, I've lost my train of thought. Your vacancy numbers has actually increased right up to 13.3% from 12.9%. So interesting things that we're seeing in the market at the moment. But before we get too much into that, let's just start with our training.
Let's get going.
So like I said, we are going to run through 5 individual chapters for you today. We're going to take you through the different credit checks available to you on the TPN system. To access that, remember, username and password that is provided. Go and click on credit checks right up at the top. Now, something that you might not know from the system is that TPN does so much more than just the traditional credit check on your tenant. We're going to take you through the know your client check, the pre-assessment, as well as running a deed search through TPN. And then in the second chapter, we are going to go through your traditional credit checks as well. So to run a pre-assessment, just click on pre-assessment check on the left-hand side. The pre-assessment check allows you to do a quick pre-assessment on a potential applicant, a potential tenant, to get some credit report indicators through that assessment. Remember, it's not a credit check. It's purely to do prior to you viewing the property with the tenant, or perhaps the tenant has already contacted you and wants to send through their application. So it allows you to check who the person is, but also gives you some vital information and some credit report indicators. So very simple to go and do. You're going to fill out your reference, the RSA ID number, first name and surname, the costing of which is only R16.41. Once you click perform check, it's going to provide you with all this information on your pre-assessment. This is vital information, like I said, to run through prior to you actually running a credit check, prior to you viewing the property with that prospective applicant. So we're going to give you some consumer information as well as an identity verification. We're going to run that through Home Affairs and the National Populations Register. You can see that this has been verified through Home Affairs, the National Populations Register, and the ID passes the muster. And then we're going to give you a quick credit report summary. We're going to tell you if this prospective applicant, tenant, has any judgments or defaults, even prior to you running a credit check on this applicant. So it's going to give you that vital information, perhaps not necessarily to make a decision on the applicant at the point in time of pre-assessment, but just to know what their credit check might look like in cases that you are going to take on this tenant. But we can see on Fred Smith, he does have a judgment as well as a default. You can also go into that through the CPB pre-assessment, and you're going to get some more information on that as well. We're going to give you some consumer information specifically on the ID. Through the SAFPS, the Fraud Prevention Service, we're going to say if there is a fraud alert on this ID as well. And then, like I said, Fred Smith both has judgments and defaults. So it gives you a quick little overview, credit report indicators, as well as showing you that the applicant is actually the applicant that you want to take to the property. Now, one thing me and Jade get a lot of questions on every single day is FICA and what is required for you as an estate agent to capture when it comes to FICA documentation from both your tenant and your landlords. This is a vital check for you to go and utilize. Michelle, do we have a question?
Peter, we have got a question.
Yes.
And it's come up 3 times, so I do think we should address it immediately.
Perfect.
The question is, do you need permission to do the pre-assessment?
Great. Thank you, Michelle. No, you don't need permission to do the pre-assessment. You only need permission to run a credit check through the system itself. So no, you don't need permission to do so. You don't need consent. Now, to run your KYC or know your client check, like I said, vitally important for you to get through the correct FICA information. We have a lot of questions regarding should the documentation be certified, etc. This is going to give you the information that you require for FICA purposes on both your tenant and your landlord. So once I go into credit checks again, click on the Know Your Client check on the left-hand tab. You can go and fill out your reference, RSA ID number, first name, surname, current address, postal code, province, and cell number. Remember, for FICA purposes, it's vitally important that you verify the ID as well as the proof of address of your client. And for the estate agents watching today, remember your client in terms of FICA is both your landlord and your tenant. So let's click on Perform Check. Now from this check, it is going to give you similar information to your pre-assessment. We're going to once again run the information through Home Affairs and the National Populations Register. We can there see that Fred Smith is actually Fred Smith. He's been run through the National Populations Register, and once again that ID passes that muster. We can see that the person has matched, the address has matched, and the telephone has matched. Now, to download your KYC certificate to keep perhaps on file, whether that be physical or electronic, you click on the Download KYC certificate, and it is going to open up the certificate that looks like this. This means that the ID as well as the proof of address has been verified. And you can see that right down at the bottom, we're going to say validation results. The person has matched, the address has matched, as well as the telephone has matched as well. So this you can keep on file for FICA purposes, that you can show that you verified the person's ID, the applicant's ID, your landlord's ID, as well as their proof of address. Obviously, through the application phase, you might be collecting other documentation like the person's bank statements, perhaps their proof of income, like their salary slips, etc. But for FICA purposes, this is it. This is incredibly vital for you to go and do if you're not getting certified copies through, and possibly, like me and Jade, have those questions. The tenant can send through some of these ID information or their proof of address. Go and run the KYC, print this out, keep it on file so that you know your tenant and your landlord has been verified. Now, a question that I get asked in a lot of the training sessions is specifically where to have a look whether your landlord is actually the landlord of the property. And I want to show you this. It is vital that you go and do this. I've had multiple occasions when I was still in practice that estate agents rented out properties for landlords who weren't actually the landlords of the properties. And this is twofold. This can be for a nefarious purpose, like a person stole the other person's ID, but also in situations where there are two owners of the property. So perhaps the property is registered in a husband and wife's name. You as an estate agent need to go and have a look whether the owner of the property is actually the owner, the landlord of the property is actually the owner of the premises. So to run a new deed search through the TPN system, you click on new deed search over there. You fill out your reference, the person's ID number, first name and surname, and once again only a cost of R12.21 for you, and click the next button. We're going to give you a summary information of the actual person, the credit check, or rather the check that is being performed, and then you can click on the TPN deeds folder right over there. We're going to give you current as well as previous properties that has been registered in Fred Smith's name. So go and do this for all your landlords. Make sure that the person that you're renting the property for is the actual owner of the premises. Very important information that you're getting through from that check. Now, one of the things I always love presenting on, and I love to show clients this, because there's so many benefits, like Jade is going to discuss as well, to submitting data into the Bureau. It's not just for proactive collections. Yes, it's used for that, because when you push data into the Bureau system, remember your tenant's credit profile gets updated each and every single month on how they pay you. So how they've paid you, if they've paid you badly, perhaps their credit profile is obviously going to deteriorate. And if they've paid you well, their credit profile is going to increase in stature. So this is important. Yes, it's used for proactive collections. You want to create an immediate repercussion for the non-payment. But also, once you submit data into the Credit Bureau system, you are going to get much more value for your money when it comes to your credit checks, and you're going to get a lot more data to base your decision on, to choose the right tenant, to choose the right tenant for the property of the landlord. And if you're an individual landlord, it's also very simple to do. Regardless of the property management system that you're utilizing, even if you're using Excel, you can update that manually. If you're using Excel, please speak to us, please speak to the data department to perhaps show you the TPN rent book system that's going to make your property investment and managing your tenants just so much easier. But like I said right at the beginning, send an email to data@tpn.co.za or just contact them over the telephone line, and they'll be able to assist you with the integration of that data into the Bureau. Now, first things first, let's perform a new consumer credit check. Remember that you can run credit checks on businesses as well as trusts in South Africa through the business credit check right over there. But for today's purposes, we're going to run two different credit checks on two different individuals to show you the differences of data submission versus non-data submission. So click on New Consumer Credit Check. Make sure that your inquiry reason is set as rentals, and you can choose whatever reference you'd like. Fill out an RSI ID number, and you can change that to a passport number by clicking that over there. Fill out the first name and surname. I'm just quickly going to change this. We are going to run a credit check on Joe Soap. The current address, fill that out, postal code, province, and cell number as well. And then click Next. From the credit score details, I want to press you all to do the best credit check that is available to you from the system. The reason for that, for the majority of estate agents looking today, landlords, you're anyway going to charge the tenant that credit check cost in terms of your lease agreement, and you're going to recoup that. But it's vital for you to get through all the information to make the decision on the tenant. Make sure that RSA ID verification is ticked, and remember, just like Michelle said when we did the first question, you need consent to perform a credit check. So through your application forms, you get the consent to run a credit check through the Credit Bureau system, and click Next. Now this I want to show you. As you can see, there's a red box that has now come up on the screen. It says, you do not currently have access to the TPN rent check or TPN smart check inquiries. Contact TPN today to find out how you can get access to more information at discounted rates. And like I said, threefold reason why you are submitting data. Yes, proactive collections, but you're getting more data through, and it's going to cost you less. The TPN rent check inquiry is not available for this client because they have not submitted data. So they're going to have to do module-based checks. They have now selected TPN, TransUnion, TPN deeds and file, and ID verification. You can obviously go and click on the bottom credit checks as well, like a bank account verification or a TPN bank code. You're not necessarily going to run a qualifications check or a criminal check on your tenant, but you can do so through the TPN system as well. We're going to click on Perform Credit Check. Now, going through this summary page, it's going to look very different to what a lot of you currently have on your systems who do have access to RentCheck. But I just want to showcase the differences of the data when you don't submit data, or even if you submit data but you're not performing the TPN RentCheck inquiry. So we're going to give you consumer information, we're going to do an ID verification similar to the KYC and pre-assessment for you, and then we're going to give you a credit score. Now please keep this in your mind when we're going through the TPN RentCheck inquiry and have a look at the differences. Yes, we've done an application score. We can see through the credit check history, the information that we've got on the system, that there is an average listing on that. The affordability, they can afford to pay you, and the probability of squatting low in this instance. But what we can see is Joe Soap's credit check comes out as good, but we're not getting all the information. And this is important to note. We're not getting all the information. We're not getting all the information that you'd like to have through your credit report to make the decision that you need to make on the prospective applicant. I always say rentals is procedurally based. The first procedure with any successful rental is what? Performing the right credit checks and making sure you are choosing the right tenant for the property. So we're going to give you a credit report summary. We can see that on TransUnion there are active accounts and inactive accounts. I'm going to go through these now in the TransUnion tab: contact addresses, contact numbers, and query information. Once we go into the TPN tab, this is obviously all the information that has now been submitted into the TPN database. We're going to give you header information, aka information, as well as associated companies. So if the person is a member or a director of a company or a closed corporation, that information is going to get pushed through to you. Contact addresses, contact numbers, and inquiry information. But what's missing over here? It is TPN payment profile information. So this tenant does not have previous TPN accounts, possibly because the person that has rented a property to this person previously has not submitted the data. And it's vitally important to know this, because how a tenant has paid their rental in the past is going to give you a very good indication of how the tenant is going to pay the rental in the future. So moving through into the TransUnion tab, we can see similar information on the consumer information, the AKAs, addresses, telephone histories, occupation, consumer counters, and we're going to give you a nice little SACRA, obviously, overview of the debt ratios that the person might have. But once again, you're not getting all the information. You might get some of it, but at the end of the day, this person that you've now credit checked, Joe Soap, could have so much more information on their report that you don't have access to as a result of non-submission of that data. You can have a look at consumer inquiries, and once again, we do have that ID verification and deeds check available for you directly on the normal credit checks, but that was selected through module system. Now, I'm going to show you the upper tier, the upper echelon credit check that you can do through the TPN system, and how much more information this has on than what we've just done. So once I go into credit checks, click right over there. We're going to perform a new consumer credit check once again. It's going to open up the same page for us. Step 1, enter the consumer details. Inquiry reason is going to be as rental. Your reference, you can go fill that out, whatever you'd like. RSA ID number, same thing. We're going to run a credit check on Fred Smith. The current addresses, postal code, province, cell number, all go and fill that out and click next. Once again, we're running the best check available. We're doing the gold credits. We want the information, the transaction histories. We want the credit information on the report, but we also want an affordability assessment done directly through the system for you, as well as working out that squat score that is going to be vital to make the decisions on. Fill out your net monthly income, total installments, as well as contributors. Make sure RSA ID verification is ticked and your NCA compliance declaration as well. Once again, you need consent to run this credit check, and click next. Now, we don't have that red box anymore because this client has submitted data into the Bureau system. And what we can see is the TPN RentCheck inquiry is now active. The TPN RentCheck inquiry is the ultimate combined tenant inquiry. I said it's the upper tier, the echelon credit check that you want. This is the one that you want to go and do. Don't select anything else. It's automatically through your rent check inquiry going to add that information through to the credit check that you're about to perform, but the rent check inquiry is the one that you must do. You can go and select bank account verification once again and the TPN bank code through this as well. But make sure you're not deselecting rent check, you're performing this. The account managers actually told me of a multiple number of clients that do have access to the rent check inquiry, that are submitting data into the bureau, but they're still not accessing rent check. They're de-clicking this and going through the normal module-based system. Don't do that. Run the TPN rent check. Yellow box check is the one that you want. And then click on Perform Credit Check. Now, just from the summary page, we can see how much information has changed between the original check on Joe Soap and the check now we're doing on Fred Smith. Consumer information, aka information, ID verification, once again we're running through, and then we get this fantastic TPN rent check scorecard. We're going to show you the combined rental and credit account payment timelines for the last couple of years, showing you how the person is paid. What we can see from this is there's a deterioration of payments. We're going to give you a gold credit score ranging from A to F. A obviously being excellent and F being the worst possible scenario on the system itself. Then we go into your credit history. Yes, their credit history is poor, but they can afford to pay you based on the affordability assessment. Unfortunately, as a result of the algorithm that ran on the probability of squatting, we can see there's a high probability of this tenant squatting. And the reason for that, we're going to have a look at when we go into the TPN accounts. The TPN payments, 13% good standing. Remember, good standing means that the person either pays on time, within a grace period, or pays late, but they pay their rental and ancillary expenses before the end of the month. There's credit payments, similar, 75% good standing, a little bit better, and 4 negatives loaded onto the system, meaning that they've got judgments and defaults. And we're going to go right into that after I've answered this question by Michelle. Yes, Michelle?
This is an important question. Peter, there are lots of questions coming up. I
Lovely.
am answering them in the chat.
Thank
and
you.
we'll address some of them late in the last 15 minutes. But this is an important one for Audrey. She's asked, apologies if I've missed this, but how do we get access to the rent check inquiry?
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for that question, Audrey. Just to reiterate, you need to submit your tenant's payment profile information into the bureau system. You can do so automatically, let's call it automatically, through the property management system that you're utilizing, whether that be a pay-prop system or something else. You can go and do that by selecting a couple of buttons on the system and pushing it through. However, if you're using something like Excel, you're going to have to manually submit, and like I said, it's better to go on the rent book system as well. But Audrey, if you've got a problem and you don't know how to submit the data into the bureau, please give our data department a call or pop them a mail at data@tpn.co.za, and then your TPN rent check inquiry is going to become active so you're able to perform this credit check. Thank you, Michelle. Then we're going to do a credit report summary. We're going to show you on TPN and TransUnion where those judgments and defaults sit, and a CPA account summary. I'm going to go through this rather in the TransUnion tab than doing so now. Once we go into the TPN tab, like I told you, vital to submit information and data into the bureau, because how the tenant has paid their rental in the past is going to showcase how they're going to pay their rental in the future. Header information, aka information, credit summaries, once again the associated companies, just like we did with the module-based check, and then all the TPN accounts. So we can see how Fred Smith has paid his rental in the past, whether that be a rental directly to a landlord like this, the rental 10,400 Rand. We can see that Fred Smith hasn't paid 4 months in a row, not the best tenant to place in the premises. Another landlord, and the tenant had not paid rental for an entire year on this, for a rental of 13,600 Rand, another rental there for 13,500 Rand, and a storage company lease as well as some contact addresses and contact numbers, and obviously the inquiry information down at the bottom. Now, the one thing I'd really love to showcase through the rent check inquiry is the SACRA information that you're going to get through as a result of you submitting data. The South African Credit Risk and Reporting Association data is going to show you exactly how the person has paid all their other accounts through their payments. So let's have a look at that. Click on the TransUnion tab. it's going to open up a page that's got the consumer information, the AKA information, the address information, telephone history, occupation, consumer counters, as well as vital information on judgments and defaults. And then we're going to show you what the outstanding debt ratios is. So how many active accounts Fred Smith has, how many closed accounts, adverse accounts, as well as their current balance on all of their credit due and outstanding, the monthly installments on that, as well as any arrears amount that is reflecting on these accounts. And we're going to showcase all of those individual accounts for you. So we can see Fred Smith's got a Markham's account, Truworth's account, and how they're paying it. If you're unsure how to read this, you can click on view all key descriptions right over there. It's going to open up a page for you that explains this, but just so you know, the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 up to 9 is how many months in arrears Fred Smith is with his payments. There's a Mr. Price weekend clothing account, 1 month in arrears, a credit card that is 6 months arrears, and I know that L means handed over to the attorneys, but like I said, if you're unsure, click on view all key descriptions. There is an account at American Swiss. There is a car at Standard Bank for 6 months in arrears. Woolworths credit card, 4 months in arrears. Woolworths clothing account, 1 month in arrears. Another car through Standard Bank, 6 months in arrears for 400,000 Rand. Another car at Standard Bank, 6 months in arrears as well, 520,000 Rand there. Standard Bank credit card, another vehicle through Nedbank, which is 9 months in arrears. That's the highest you can go. And then we're going to give you the National Loan Registries accounts as well. So if the person has short-term lending, like payday loans, through these companies like Wonga, it is going to pick up on this for you as well. And you can see exactly how indebted this person is prior to you renting out the property to them. I can't stress this enough. The credit report between Joe Soap and Fred Smith, very different information that you're getting correct. But remember, the credit report that you've performed on Joe Soap did not contain all the information. You want all the information. You want the rent check inquiry. You want to submit your data into the Bureau. And it's so simple to go and do. Great. That brings us to the end of running through the actual credit check system through the Bureau. I'm going to pass over to Jade, who is going to do Chapter 3, Chapter 4, and Chapter 5 for us today. Please stay tuned. Vital information on letters of demand and blacklisting as well. Thank you, Jade.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just going to quickly run through shop.tpn.co.za, where you are able to purchase all of the packs we have on our system. So we're going to have a look at the residential lease pack. This pack contains 32 documents to assist you from the beginning right to the end of your lease. If we have a look at what is on offer, we have the application form, which has the built-in consent clause to obtain a credit check. We then have resolutions for board of directors, trustees, and members of a closed corporation if you are signing up a company. We have, very importantly and very much underutilized, the notice of termination or renewal of a fixed term lease. There is a requirement in the Consumer Protection Act where 40 to 80 business days before the expiry of the fixed term of your contract, you need to notify your tenant if you intend to renew or to terminate the contract. So this notice is very important to send out to your tenant. We then have the lease addendum. If there's any extra information you need to include in the lease agreement, you can include it in the addendum. We have the deed of surety. If your tenant wants to sign up with a surety, it is contained in this agreement. The acknowledgement of debt. If your tenant has fallen into arrears and you want to enter into a payment arrangement with them, both parties will sign this document. We then also have a special power of attorney. If, for example, your landlord is out of the country and you need signing rights on their behalf, you as the agent will fill that out. It's both for juristic and natural persons. We have inspection documents, and as I said, 32 documents to assist you from beginning to end of your lease. not to mention our lease agreements, natural person, juristic person. We have the student lease, the month-to-month lease, and we even have a holiday lease for all your short-term rentals. And then also the natural and juristic person mandate, which governs relationship between the landlord and the agent. It's as easy as adding to cart, residential lease. So we'll go back to home. But this product is available at 920 Rand. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to our TPN system. If you are submitting your data into the TPN system, this is what your dashboard will look like. And these are the payment flags. If your lease agreement stipulates that rent is due on the 1st of the month, if it is paid and cleared by the 1st of the month, you will update your tenant's record to reflect as paid on time. For all payments made between the 2nd and the 7th of the month, that is a grace period payment, and this is what the flag will look like. If your tenant is making payment after the 7th of the month, you will have to update their record to reflect as a paid late. If your tenant is partially paying both rental and utilities, it will be this purple flag, and that is a partial payment. And then lastly, if they are failing to pay their rental account, you will update their record to reflect a did not pay. TPN is driven towards what we call soft collections. We are here to assist you in expediting the collections process. So I'm going to show you a few of the tools that we have on offer. The first step is your submission of data. As soon as you are submitting your data into the system, your tenant receives an SMS from TPN, which is a free service, advising how their record has been updated. So if we navigate towards the My Data tab, this is where you will input your tenant's reference and click on their record. So I'm going to direct you towards the left-hand panel, and we'll start with the letters. So these are the letters we have on offer. The tenant welcome letter is also a form of proactive collections. We suggest this is sent out as part of a welcome pack you are sending to your tenant even before they take occupation. The welcome pack can include a copy of the signed lease agreement, body corporate rules if it applies, and this welcome letter coming straight from TPN Credit Bureau. You are already creating an immediate repercussion for your tenant because you are advising them that how they pay on a monthly basis is going to have an effect on their credit record. If they are paying on time, it will have a positive impact on their credit record. If they are partially paying, paying late, or not paying, it will adversely affect the credit record. And it does create an immediate repercussion because they are aware of this even before they've taken occupation. That is the first step, is sending out your tenant welcome letter. The second step in the soft collections process is the 1st of the month has come and gone, and your tenant has failed to make payment of their rental. You need to be issuing your letters of demand as soon as possible because you want to get a non-paying tenant out of the property as soon as possible. So I'm going to show you how to send that letter of demand. We have two different letters of demand on our system, as you can see. The first one is the 20 business day letter of demand, which you are sending to your residential tenants in the fixed term of their contract. The second letter is the 7-day letter of demand, which you are sending to your commercial tenants or to your residential tenants on a month-to-month contract. Okay, so this specific profile has two associated tenants. Your tenants are joint and severally liable for payment of rental, so you need to ensure that you are sending your letters of demand to both tenants. It's very important to note that. Okay, so the first step is your CPA compliance check. You need to confirm if the contract is in its fixed term or if it is on a month-to-month basis. And then you also here need to confirm if your landlord is a juristic or natural person, and whether your tenant is a juristic or natural person. You then validate this information and move on to the last step. So here we enter the letter details. Very important. Firstly, you put your default date. Since when has your tenant been in arrears? The amount due includes both your outstanding rental and utilities. The contact person, if your tenant wants to contact you to arrange payment, who do they need to contact within the agency and what is their contact number? We then scroll down to confirm your tenant's payment profile information. You can see this tenant is in arrears and a letter of demand is due. The next step is quite important as well. This will mirror the domicile clause in your contract. So on the TPN system, you can either send your letter of demand via registered post or via snail mail. You have that option. You can also notify your tenant via SMS that they have been sent a letter of demand. You can either email or fax the letter of demand to your tenant as well, and then you can CC yourself here so you can get a copy of that as well. And then here you just confirm that you'd like to send the letter as per the above step. Then it's as simple as a click of a button, you send that letter, and if you want to view a copy of how your letter was sent, you click on this folder over here and you can download a copy of the letter of demand for your record purposes. Okay, so the next letter we'll be sending is in the instance where you've placed your tenant in breach because they have failed to pay their rental by sending them a letter of demand, and they have failed to remedy that breach in full. Remember, a partial payment does not extinguish the letter of demand. They must remedy their breach in full by making full payment of what is demanded from them. So we click here on the lease cancellation. Remember, we're sending letters of demand to all associated tenants. It is the same with the lease cancellation. All tenants must be notified that the lease has been cancelled. Okay. So this is quite simple. You'd stipulate here when your letter of demand was sent, and this is also a fact-checking process for yourself as landlord and agent, because you want to make sure that you're not sending out the lease cancellation prematurely. You need to ensure that you've given your tenants the full time period stipulated to remedy their breach before you send a cancellation. And then here you put in when you want them to vacate. And then the delivery options are the same as the letter of demand. You'd have a look at your domicile clause, see what was agreed to between the parties to receive legal notices. You'll send it in that way. We have a delivery confirmation, and then you send off your letter of cancellation. You're also able to view it on this tab. You can download a copy of that. So the last soft collections tool we have on the TPN system is the blacklisting tool. So this you will use when your tenant has been, there are 3 requirements for blacklistings. The first is that your tenant must be in arrears for 3 consecutive billing cycles. The second is that 20 business days must pass before you load your blacklisting. And the third requirement is that your letter of demand itself must contain a warning to your tenant of the adverse effects to their credit record should they fail to make payment. TPN letters of demand are compliant with legislation, and this is regulated in terms of the National Credit Act. Okay, so I'm going to show you on the system how to load a new blacklisting. Once again, you'll navigate towards the left-hand tab, click on the blacklisting options, and click here to add a new blacklisting record. Much like the letters of demand and the notice to vacate, we will be blacklisting all the associated tenants, provided the requirements have been met. So your first step is to select the tenants. Once again, you insert your default date, and you select a default rating. Has your tenant breached the contract? Have they failed to pay their utilities? And under amount due, you'll put exactly the amount that is outstanding, and you can provide just a little synopsis of what they have done to be blacklisted. Then once again here, we are confirming the payment profile information. And this NCA compliance declaration is very important, because here you are confirming that you have given the tenants 20 business days written notice of your intention to list them on a credit bureau. It's as easy as that. We then just save the listing, and then it will reflect under active listings on their TPN record. It is very important to note that you cannot blacklist your tenant for damages only. It only relates to outstanding rental and utilities. And through the TPN system, you are also able to blacklist them on both TPN and the TransUnion Credit Bureau. So we've come to the end of the, okay, not just yet. I have a quick question from Mish.
You have a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to do them in groupings. Let's start with the letter of demands. Angie has asked how many days after the 1st before we can issue a letter of demand. I imagine if the rent's due on the 1st, when can we issue our letter?
So if your rental is due on the 1st of the month and it is not paid and cleared in your account by the 1st, you should be issuing your letters of demand on the 2nd of the month.
So if, for example, the rent is due on the 15th of the month, when can we send our letter of demand?
On the 16th,
Brilliant.
if you have not received payment.
Okay, the second question we have is from Dynamic Properties. I imagine that's Sue. What do you do when you have given your tenant the 7-day demand letter and the tenant still refuses to move out?
If you've sent the 7-day letter of demand and you've sent your cancellation on the 8th day, and you've given your tenant a reasonable period within which to vacate, if they have failed to vacate, they are now squatting in your property, and you will need to get an eviction order to get them out the property.
I just want to ask the question slightly differently, Jade. So I imagine the reason that you send a 7-day letter of demand is because you have a month-to-month tenant,
Correct,
right?
yes.
What happens if you don't? What happens if you have a fixed-term lease agreement with a natural person tenant and you send a 7-day letter of demand when in actual fact you were required to send a 20 business day letter of demand?
In that case, the time period is very important. So you've taken the correct step by placing your tenant in breach, but please be aware that you must wait the full 20 business day period before you send your cancellation.
And the only way your tenant can become an illegal tenant is after you've sent the cancellation
Yes.
letter. So the first step is the letter of demand, demanding
Correct.
payment. The second step is the letter of cancellation.
Yes.
And only then do you have an illegal tenant.
Because you need to give them a reasonable period within which to vacate. Once that period has come and gone and they are still in the property, they are then squatting. So that is when eviction becomes important, yes.
Right, Ruvashni has asked a question. If a letter is sent out and the tenant communicates a payment plan and then defaults, do we need to issue another letter of demand or cancellation notice?
If they default in terms of an acknowledgement of debt, okay, so you need to first place them in breach, right? You've sent them a letter of demand and they have now contacted you to say, we want to enter into a repayment plan. If they default on the repayment plan, you will have to issue another letter of demand and then cancel the agreement.
Perfect. Mari has asked, is it better to use the registered letter of demand?
It is better, yes, because then you have that registered slip which serves as proof as to when your letter was sent and that your letter was in fact sent.
What happens if you have a domicile clause in your lease agreement for an email?
If you're sending it from the TPN system, you are able to obtain proof that it was sent. So if you're stipulating that it was sent by email and you're sending it via TPN, you can just log on to the letters tab, as I showed you, and you can show that it was actually sent by email, the date and time it was sent as well.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the shop then. On the shop, some of our clients have asked, Lease in particular has asked, how do I download the updates that came into effect on the lease pack? I am a paying member of the lease pack.
It's an automatic update. So normally what happens is if we make amendments to our lease agreements, we do send out a mailer to advise you that it has been updated. Once it's been updated, you can just log onto the shop and download whatever document you need.
So the address there is https://shop.tpn.co.za and use your existing TPN login details to do that. One last question, because it's a legal question, so I want to throw it at you, Jade. Ruvashni is also asking, is the power of attorney form signed once or for each lease signed? And I imagine that's the power of attorney when we're signing it with the landlord that gives the agent the power of attorney to enter into the lease agreement.
Signing it once is fine. Signing it once, the landlord has given you signing rights, that's perfectly fine. You only need to sign it once.
Perfect. Jade, that comes to the end of the questions for the moment.
Okay, so that also comes to the end of our formal session. The feedback form will be made available shortly, and I'm going to invite Peter on to join me so we can deal with more of your questions.
Perfect. I am just sending out the feedback form. I've loaded it live, so if our delegates can please feel free to click on that link and start sending us their feedback. I'm going to ask some of the questions that were asked in the session. So let's start at the beginning where we were talking about the pre-assessment inquiry. Ruvashni asked, will we have a challenge to conduct the pre-assessment before the viewing with confidential information? Is there a form on the TPN lease pack we can use without being attacked by the client? I guess that speaks to consent, Peter.
100% correct, Michelle. For the information that you're pulling through the system, specifically the pre-assessment, remember it's not a credit check. So in terms of the National Credit Act, you would not need consent to run that specific check prior to viewing the property. Inherently, also, once POPI comes into play, obviously to see personal information and to process personal information, in the majority of instances you're going to need consent. So it might be a requirement later on to be able to get that consent, perhaps even just through a telephone call through to the tenant asking, listen here, we require your information, please send us through your ID, your address information, perhaps your telephone contact details. At the end of the day, Ruvashni, you're going to need this information anyway to fill out your application forms and leases, as well as properly viewing the premises with the tenant. So, yeah.
Mari has asked, our experience is that people are very dubious. If you want their ID before viewing and they give nicknames and not full names, please advise.
That should perhaps already be an indicator that you don't necessarily want to place this tenant in the unit. So I can't really tell you what to do, but my advice would be is to not view the premises with that specific tenant if they don't give you the information. Remember, at the end of the day, to enter into the lease agreement, to fill out the application form, you're going to need all these details anyway.
Peter, I read the most amazing article on Bloomberg yesterday about properties in Ireland. Properties in Ireland, if you want to go view a property for purchase, not for rent, but for purchase, you have to put down wait for it, £10,000. In fact, it was 10,000 euros, viewing application deposit to go and view properties. Properties are being sold at the moment without being viewed. Obviously not the market we're in at the moment.
It almost sounds like Cape Town prior to lockdown, doesn't it?
Not the market we're in at the moment, but absolutely, we don't want to be dealing with time wasters.
Of course not. Yes, Michelle.
Okay, so now we've had a question about the KYC inquiry. We've dealt with the pre-assessment inquiry. Is the KYC required for private landlords dealing directly with the tenants?
Okay, so interesting question. At the end of the day, the landlord does not need to be FICA compliant. It's only in instances where you are an accountable institution in terms of the Act, and that would be specifically for estate agents. So landlords don't need to be FICA compliant regardless. And this is something me and Jade say to clients every single day. Rentals is procedural. Whether you're a landlord or whether you're an estate agent, the procedure remains the same. I would actually, as an individual landlord, still collect all the information. Make sure that the tenant's details are correct. Even run a KYC, because at the end of the day, you need to assure that the ID has been verified and you've got a specific proof of address. I would just do it. At the end of the day, it's not going to necessarily take longer to do, but it is going to give you more information. And like I said, rentals, procedural based. We all know this. We need to follow procedure.
Jade, I've got a question for you. It's come up a few times. So it's with regards to the reasonable period. Once you've put your tenant in breach, you've sent the letter of cancellation. The question that is being asked quite a few times is, what is a reasonable time for the tenant to vacate the property after the cancellation letter is issued?
You need to apply your discretion, but you also want to make sure that if you are cancelling, Generally, you don't want it to go past the end of that specific month, because then you are creating a tacit lease agreement, which is something you want to avoid. But please do apply your discretion and reasonableness.
Okay, I'm going to thank you very much for that, Jade. I'm going to now hop on to a question with regards to the actual credit checks now. The one question was, when a tenant is under debt review, does it show in the inquiry? That's the first question. Peter?
Wonderful. Is this perhaps a question from Petra Fleming? Not. I actually had this one prior to this session today. Yes, it will show up that the person is under debt review. Interestingly enough, we have been contacted by a few clients saying that they do have and have placed tenants previously that have been under debt review, and they've been great tenants. I'm guessing in an instance like that as well, first questions first, yes, it is going to display on the credit check itself. Secondly, you obviously need to use your discretion when placing a tenant. And if a person is under debt review, it also means that they are sort of consolidating their debt and they're having a look at repayments. So there's a specific budget in mind when they are looking at what they can afford versus what they can't afford. So it is not one of those things that you sort of just scrap them from the beginning and say, listen, we're not going to rent out to you. It's a discussion with the landlord. It's important to get the tenant's budget to show exactly what they can afford. But the initial question, yes, it is going to display on the credit check itself.
Fantastic. Thanks, Peter, because you've led into the second question, which is what are the pros and cons of entering into a lease with someone under debt review. Jade, we've had a couple of these questions, so let's just address them quickly. Do we get certificates of attendance, and do we earn non-verified CPD points for the session?
Yes and yes.
Easy one.
So please, in order to earn your CPD, non-verified CPD points and your certificate, you do need to complete our feedback form. So if you can click on that bit.ly link that both Brian and I are posting, fill in your feedback form, and then our events team will happily send you your certificate at the end of training. We've had a question from Linda Watson. She's asking, what if the tenant enters into a repayment plan after they moved out to repay the debt and then default? Jade?
So the blacklisting requirement, it does not require the agreement to have continued. You can even blacklist your tenant if they have vacated. Just ensure you're not blacklisting for prescribed debt. So debt prescribes after 3 years. Wanda is asking, can we have the process of eviction? That is a whole a session on its own. So we will make sure that we post an invite, and let's do an eviction session.
Michelle, perhaps if I can just jump in over there. If you are aware of our drafting attorneys, SSL Incorporated, on their resources page, on their actual website, they do have an eviction flowchart that runs through the entire process from A to Z. If you're not sure how to get that, I can send you a link afterwards. Just pop me an mail or pop legal@tpn.co.za mail, and we'll send you through that process flow, or the link at least as well.
Jade, Nicole's just asking a follow-up question. Do you mean that if we give a tenant a breach letter on the 3rd of the month, that we can give them notice to terminate on the 30th of the same month? Does one calendar month's notice not apply? It would depend. If you're sending your letters of demand out on the 3rd of the month and it's a 20 business day letter of demand, it will work out to roughly a month. So you'll only be able to terminate by around the 3rd or the 4th of the following month. I stand to be corrected as far as the days are concerned. So you wouldn't be able to terminate before the end of that specific month that the letter was sent, because it does work out to, the 20 business days works out to a month. So you'll have to terminate at the end of the following month. I think also just on that note, remember the month termination notice that you sent or send is only applicable when a contract rolls over on a month-to-month basis, in which Section 14 of the Consumer Protection Act is not going to be applicable. So the 20 business day letter of demand won't come into application. This is only in terms of when contracts roll over on a month-to-month basis. If it's still in its fixed term, you must follow process, like Jade correctly explained. The 20 business day letter of demand, you wait out that time period and you cancel only thereafter. Simon is asking, is TPN blacklisting for 12 months? After the 12-month period, what happens to the tenant if they have not cleared the debt that they were blacklisted for? Very importantly, yes, the blacklisting does reflect for a period of 12 months.
If your tenant has still failed to remedy in terms of the outstanding amount, if the amount is under 20,000 Rand, you can approach the small claims court and they will assist you in obtaining judgment. If it exceeds 20,000 Rand, you then need to approach an attorney to assist you in obtaining judgment against the tenant, which is valid for a period of 30 years.
Thank you everyone for the session. We've come to the end of our questions. It has been a very debated session, and we really enjoyed the questions and the feedback. We've had some nice ideas for further sessions. Ravashni suggested maintenance. We've had a suggestion for evictions. And any last
Nuggets
of information. Thank you, Peter.
Michelle, I don't think I've said this today, but I think data submission is quite important. So yes, once again, if you're not submitting data into the Bureau, we can assist you with that. Last thing from my side, please remember to subscribe to the TPN YouTube channel. Click the notifications bell, because then you're going to get all the notifications that you need when we are doing upcoming training for me and Jade. But have a fantastic day further, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.